Today, we're going to talk about what just happened in 2024. And trust me, this isn't just another year in review piece. This is a story of how America finally stopped hitting the snooze button and woke the hell up. You know how sometimes you can feel a storm coming before you see it? The air gets heavy, there's that electricity in the atmosphere, and you just know something big is about to break. That was 2024 in a nutshell. But instead of a thunderstorm, we got a Category 5 hurricane that completely reshuffled the political deck. And folks, the cleanup is going to take us well into 2025 and beyond. Let's talk about some headlines that made history and the stories behind them all. First, starting with the night that reality broke through the BS. Remember back in the day when political debates were just political theater? The drill. Two candidates trading rehearsed zingers while dancing around actual answers like teenagers at their first school dance. The Atlanta debate between Trump and Biden wasn't just something different. It was like watching reality kick down the door of the Matrix. Picture this. Millions of Americans sitting at home, maybe scrolling through their phones while half watching what they expected to be just another boring debate. Then suddenly, bam, everyone's eyes are glued to the screens, watching in real time as the carefully constructed narrative about Biden's mental capabilities crumbled faster than a sandcastle at high tide. And let me tell you, as someone who's been talking about Biden's cognitive decline for years on this show, even I wasn't prepared for what happened that night. It wasn't just that Biden was having a bad night. This was like watching a quarterback try to play after taking maybe one too many hits to the head. Looking at you, Tua. Every fumbled response, every confused stare, everywhere he just drifted away mid-sentence. It was just the kind of thing that makes you want to look away, but you can't. Like a car accident in slow motion. And Trump, remember how the media used to paint him as this loose cannon who couldn't string two coherent thoughts together? Surprise, turns out, when you're not filtering everything through a corporate media lens, you get a very different picture, don't you? The guy showed up looking like he just finished teaching a master class in policy while Biden looked like he was still trying to find the classroom. And the aftermath was like watching dominoes fall. But these weren't just any dominoes. These were the load-bearing pillars of the Democratic narrative. When you've got 3/4 of voters saying they're worried about the president's mental fitness, including a very large chunk of Democrats, that's not just a red flag. That's the whole flag factory catching on fire. And let's talk about when politics got real, really real. Because if the debate changed how people saw Trump, what happened next turned him into something else entirely. Look, I've been critical of Trump plenty of times on this show. You longtime listeners know that. But when someone takes a bullet and keeps standing, literally bleeding from their ear while rallying their supporters, that's not politics anymore. That's just stuff of legend. The Butler, Pennsylvania incident wasn't just another news story. This was a moment that cut through all the political noise, all the partisan bickering, and touched something deeper in the American psyche. Like when you watch someone nearly lose their life on live television, it has a way of putting things in perspective real quick. And let's talk about the wake-up call that finally got through, because what really blows my mind is how sometimes the most important shifts in society don't come with this big bang, but they come with that very quiet moment of reality sinking in. And I think watching Trump stand there in Butler, that was one of those moments in America where we all collectively went, oh shit, this is real. Think about it. Here's a guy that the media has been painting as this cartoon villain for years, the next Hitler, the end of democracy. But what happens when that villain takes a bullet and keeps standing? When he shows more strength and composure under literal fire than most politicians show at a friendly town hall? It changes things. And let me paint a picture here of what happened in Butler, because this wasn't just another campaign stop gone wrong. No, this was like one of those moments in a movie where everything suddenly goes into slow motion because it's all happening so fast. Trump's at the podium, doing his thing. Then we hear a gunshot. Out of nowhere, in a split second, America held its breath because instead of chaos and panic, what do we see? Trump bleeding, but unbowed, literally waving off his security team saying, no, we're not done here, basically. Fight, right? And that's not politics. That's not some carefully scripted moment dreamed up by campaign consultants. That is raw, that's real, and I'll tell you, it hit different, right? Even people who couldn't stand Trump found themselves having to admit, begrudgingly, of course, maybe that he showed something about his character they hadn't expected. And this was a domino effect. Like how this one moment changed everything because, and we talked about this a lot on the show, how one moment, one event can completely reshape everyone's perceptions. If you remember when COVID hit and suddenly everyone became an armchair epidemiologist, yeah, and we all worship Fauci. After Butler, suddenly everyone became an expert on political violence and civil discourse. But here's the thing, and we've been banging this drum for years. This event made America look at itself and ask some very uncomfortable questions. Like, how did we get to a point where attempting to assassinate a presidential candidate was something that could actually happen still, not in the 60s? And not once, but twice, because it happens afterwards. It's like that moment where you're having some argument with someone and suddenly you hear yourself and think, whoa, maybe I'm the one who needs to calm down here. Been there, done that. America had that moment. And the media had that moment. Even some of Trump's harshest critics had that moment. And you want to know the really wild part? The assassination attempt actually helped humanize Trump in a way that years of campaigning never could. Think about that. It took someone literally trying to have to kill him for people to finally see him as a human being rather than just this big political boogeyman that they built up in their heads. Now let's go to the other side of the aisle, literally, and we'll talk about the Kamala Harris factor. Because when historic meets reality, let's talk about Kamala Harris. Because this is where things get interesting. Because if you remember when she first got picked as VP, and all the media was falling all over themselves about how historic it was, turns out historic doesn't automatically translate into competent or electable, which a lot of my Democratic friends are still having trouble coming to grips with. And here's the thing about Harris that nobody wants to say out loud, but we're going to say it here because that's what we do. She was a disaster waiting to happen. And I don't mean that in a partisan way at all. I mean it in a water is wet, sky is blue kind of way. You had someone who couldn't even make it through the Democratic primaries in 2020, who spent her entire vice presidency either invisible or cackling awkwardly at serious questions. Suddenly now thrust into the spotlight as a Democratic nominee. It's like taking someone who couldn't finish a 5K, me, and expecting them to run a marathon. It's just not going to end well. And let's talk about this great reality check of 2024, because watching Harris trying to campaign against Trump, it was like watching someone bring a squirt gun to a forest fire. Sorry for the reference at this not good time for LA. But the contrast, it couldn't have been more stark. On one side, you have Trump. He's battle-scarred, literally took a bullet, speaking directly to the people's concerns about the economy, inflation, immigration, and America's place in the world. And on the other side, you've got Kamala Harris, still trying to push the same tired narratives that weren't working when Biden was in the race as the head of the campaign. And it reminded me of back in school when you give the presentation, but you didn't really understand the material, that nervous laugh, those rehearsed talking points that don't quite answer the question. That was the entire Harris campaign in a nutshell. And the American people, thank God, saw right through it. Because the numbers don't lie, even when politicians do. See, when you look at how the media tried to spin the polling numbers leading up to the election, it was like we were seeing two Americas living in alternative realities where on one side you had wishful thinking it could somehow change basic math. Let's break this down for simple terms. The economy, still in shambles after years of Biden's policies. The border, more porous than a kitchen sponge. Inflation, making grocery shopping feel like luxury experiences, but minus the actual luxury goods. Crime, through the roof in Democratic-run cities. And what was Harris's response to all this? Trump is Hitler. He's a threat to democracy. It's like someone trying to tell them that their house is going to burn down next week while they're watching it flood. Again, sorry, California. See, people care about what's affecting their lives today. And this is where the silent majority finally found its voice. Because what the real story of 2024 was, it wasn't just about Trump winning. It's about how America and the American people finally said, enough. Enough to the gaslighting, enough to the manipulation, and enough to the endless stream of bullshit coming from our so-called experts and elites. For years, we've been told that questioning election integrity makes you a conspiracy theorist, that wanting secure borders makes you racist, that thinking biological sex matters makes you a bigot, that supporting American first policies makes you xenophobic. But here's the thing, folks. When you push people too far, and when you keep telling them not to believe their own eyes and ears, eventually they push back. And in 2024, that pushback came in the form of electoral tsunamis that nobody in the mainstream media saw coming, or, okay, they did. Let's be real. They just didn't want to admit it. So let's look ahead, because here we are in 2025. And what do we have in store for us? And right now, the answer is, first, we're seeing the real impact of everything that happened in 2024. Trump's back in the White House, soon to be, but this time it's different. This isn't the same Trump from 2016 or hell, even 2020. This is a Trump who's been through the fire, literally and figuratively, and come out stronger. Again, sorry, California. But let me share some predictions for 2025. My predictions. And remember, folks, you heard them here first. So when they become corporate news headlines, you know that they actually were predictions from Nicholas Stradamus. We'll go with that. First, the great institutional cleanup. So Trump's not just going after the deep state this time. He's going after the entire system. The system that tried to destroy him. I expect major reforms in the DOJ, the FBI, thanks Kash Patel, the intelligence community, and the administrative state across the board. I think there's going to be an economic reset. Remember all those Biden-era regulations that were choking our economy? I think they're going bye-bye. Fast. I think we're going to talk about energy independence 2.0, manufacturing coming back to America, real infrastructure development, not Green Deal, was it Green New Deal? Yeah, none of that garbage. And then culturally, I think we're going to see a counteroffensive. I think we're going to see that this pendulum continues to swing back hard against the woke ideology in schools. It's continuing to swing back against corporate DEI obsession. It's swinging back a bit against big tech censorship and gender ideology being pushed on kids. And let's finish up by talking about how reality is hitting different. And it's hitting hard as we look back at 2024. Because for years in this show, we've been talking about how there would come a moment where all the BS would hit the wall, where the gaslighting and the manipulation, it would all finally be exposed and be called out by the average person. We called it the revenge of the normies. 2024 wasn't just that moment. It was all of that moment, but happening all at once. Like watching a freight train, or I guess because I'm a dad and I watch a lot of Thomas the Tank Engine, Gordon, when he hits the wall at full speed and he goes through, and then the Sir Topham Hatt and the conductor are all injured and have the broken arm. I watch too much kid shows. And who am I kidding? I watched them myself when I was growing up, and I enjoy it. Not the point here. Let's paint the picture of what just happened. Remember back when COVID hit and suddenly all the people were experts again, right? And they're telling you to trust the science. And then the goalposts kept moving. That was 2024. But all of a sudden, it was like the microscope finally got clear. And all of a sudden, all the things that didn't make sense in the past started making perfect sense. It's almost like a great awakening. And no, not that kind. Here's something to think about, and something I've been thinking about too. How do you know when a society hits a breaking point? When does that switch flip from this is fine to enough is enough? In 2024, we found out it wasn't just a one thing that did it. It was like all these things just accumulating at once. You had the border crisis getting so bad that even CNN couldn't ignore it anymore. Inflation making people choose between filling their gas tank or filling the fridge. Crime turning cities into something out of Escape from New York. Schools trying to convince kids that they can change their gender like they like to change their socks. But here's, I think, one of the main things to take away. And again, this is something we've talked about here on this show. It wasn't just conservatives who had enough. We started to see this incredible shift where just your average, everyday, regular folks, your normal Americans who just, they never really paid attention much to politics, started suddenly watching and waking up and asking questions. And the questions that changed everything weren't your typical political questions. They were the kind of questions that cut right to the chase. Why can't I afford my groceries when the government keeps telling me the economy's great? Why are my kids coming home from school more confused than it was when they left to school? Why do I feel like I'm a stranger in my own country? How come questioning any of this makes me a bad person? And you know what these questions remind me of? It's like when you're in a bad relationship and you finally start asking yourself, a minute, is this normal? Once those questions start, there's no going back. And that's exactly what happened in 2024. And it's in no part thanks really to the media meltdown, which I would otherwise call the day the narrative died. Because this is my favorite part. Watching the mainstream corporate media try to spin what was happening in 2024, it was like watching someone try to bail out the Titanic with a coffee cup. It would have been so funny if it wasn't so pathetic. Remember how they tried to spin the assassination attempts on Trump? First, it was an isolated incident, then mental health issues, and then finally, but Trump's rhetoric. It's like we're reading from the same playbook that suddenly stopped working after decades of them implementing it over and over. And don't even get me started on how they covered Harris's campaign, because every stumble was, she was actually a brilliant strategic moving there. Every gaffe, it was taken out of context. Every terrible poll was within a margin of error. It was like watching Baghdad Bob tell us that everything was fine while tanks rolled in behind him. And again, this is where the silent majority got really loud. All those regular Americans who had been silently watching everything go crazy, they finally found their voice. And let me tell you, when that silent majority stops being silent, it's not a whisper. It's a roar. We saw that in school board meetings. We saw it in local elections. We saw it on social media. We saw it in the marketplace. And what did it lead to? I dare say it's the Great Reset that actually happened, not just the one that the elites had planned. Because this is what we're starting to see here, where all the pieces are coming together in 2025 specifically. Sometimes you're putting a puzzle together and then suddenly you see it, you see the actual picture. That's what happened after 2024 as we head into 2025. Again, Trump's victory wasn't just the political win that it was, because it was huge. That was like watching America look in the mirror and decide to finally get its act together. You know when you finally decide to clean out your garage after years of just throwing stuff in there? That's what Trump's second term is shaping up to be. So what 2025 looks like thus far and why it matters. First off, we're seeing, again, what I call the great cleanup. No, not just talking about sweeping a lot of dust under the proverbial rug. I'm talking about a complete overhaul of these federal agencies. I think we're going to see real border security, not just talking about it, getting our economy back on track, and most importantly, putting America first. And this time we actually mean it, because this is what we've talked about a lot on this show. It's not just about Trump or any one person ever. It's about, there's been a fundamental shift in how Americans are thinking about our country and our future. And I think this is the wake-up call that stuck. Because what's different this time is that people aren't just awake. They're staying awake. It's like that moment you finally realize you've been playing a rigged game. And instead of just complaining about it, you decide to flip the table and start a new game with your own rules. And we're seeing this play out in our local communities, taking back control from federal overreach. We're seeing this with parents demanding real education, not indoctrination. We're seeing this with Americans supporting businesses that share their values. And we're seeing this in a return to common sense. So where do we go from here? That's my take. And I always try to shoot straight with you. 2024 wasn't just another year in American history. It was the year I think America finally said enough is enough and meant it. So looking ahead to where we are in 2025 and beyond, I'm actually optimistic. I think the future looks bright, to coin a phrase from Patrick Bet David, because No, not everything's perfect. Far from it. But because for the first time in a long time, it feels like we're finally being honest about the problems and we're finally serious about fixing them. The bottom line is that at the end of the day, 2024 taught us that reality always wins, even when it takes a while. That American spirit isn't dead, it was just taking a little bit of a nap. That common sense isn't so common, but it is making a comeback, and sometimes you need to hit rock bottom before you can actually start climbing your way back up. And you know, that's okay. Because I always say this on here, right? It's not about winning arguments, it's about winning hearts and minds. And in 2024, America did just that. We didn't just win an election, we saw America win its soul back. So as we continue forward in 2025, remember this. The real work is just beginning. But for the first time in a long time, what was that from Frozen? In the first time in forever, it feels like we're actually ready to make this work. So this is Brian Nichols telling you what nobody else will, the gosh darn truth. And yes, the truth hurts sometimes, but it's always better than the comfortable lie. So please keep thinking, keep questioning, and never, ever stop fighting for what's right. And hey, before I go, just remember what we always say here in the show. Meet people where they're at on the issues they care about. It's not just a slogan. It's how we're going to save this country, one conversation at a time. So stay free, stay strong, and I'll see you next time here on The Brian Nichols Show.
Thanks for listening to The Brian Nichols Show. Find more episodes at briannicholsshow.com.